My name is Lirun. I'm an Israeli who lives in Yafo. I surf, I work as a lawyer, and I am heavily involved in peace projects that are related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
How would you describe the conflict? How does it touch your personal life?
The conflict is characterized, at least for me, as a protracted conflict, and it fits in the category of long conflicts. The biggest thing that sticks out in a long conflict like ours is the complete and total breakdown of trust and the evaporation of hope. It touches you on a daily basis because people can't see that far, people live for now. And sometimes that short-term vision stops them from doing anything to really change things.
So we were just talking a little bit about this idea, 2 stars for peace. What is your take on that?
I think 2 stars for peace is a very stimulating idea. And there are many interesting things that can be derived from the idea as a concept. My favorite things in the concept of 2 stars for peace are the fact that it relates to each side of the conflict as a star, meaning it is something that is primary, it has light, it is natural, it is real. I like the equality in the theory. 2 stars are the same. They see each other eye to eye. I like the hope because it is connected to light. I like the fact that it's different from your usual theories and ideas, and I think it can be really useful in exploring additional ideas and details of wider solutions. I think some of the challenges in the idea are how it relates to each side's aspirations for self-governance and sovereignty. And I think the alignment of the values in the theory and the difference between that and the values on both sides might be a bit of a challenge for direct implementation. However, as a whole, I think there are some very inspiring notions in the overall concept, and I found it very fascinating to explore those with you earlier.
You being Israeli, what would be the advantages? What are the advantages you could see with such kind of concept?
So I think the instant advantage and benefit of this theory and concept is that it basically drags each party in front of the mirror and forces them to stare at themselves in the eyes and say, what are my values? What is my constitution? Because if I am going to become a part of a constitutional democracy, I have to know what my values are so that I can be aligned and so I can be consistent, because that's a fundamental part of being in a democracy. I think also the juxtaposition of star faces star, the equality between the two, I think that in itself is a huge advantage as well, because most of the theories we see today talk about aggressor and victim, oppressor and scapegoat. They talk about all these unbalanced theories of how the parties are approaching each other. And by creating an instant equality, people can treat each other with an instant respect. That's at least what I see within the theory.
How could it happen? What could people do to make it happen?
So, due to the fact that democratic values have been so heavily corroded and compromised in the Middle East, and due to the fact that we've become so used to basically giving up on fundamental principles in order to safeguard and make sure that we protect other things that we perceive as high values, I think a realignment of values through education, sponsored by the governments of both sides, would be very important, and would have to happen at the earlier stages, literally from kindergartens all the way through to the highest levels of matriculation, and that would be one step. Another step would be to genuinely adopt those principles, including transparency and equality facing the law, and separation of powers, etc., in a genuine way throughout the entities, or the state and the non-state entities, including eradication of corruption, or in Israel, for example, we have an issue of centralization of power, which is a very difficult issue facing our democracy. So basically that internal reinforcement would be necessary in order to even begin that long journey towards accepting a homogeneous democratic regime spanning both the nations.
So my very last question actually would be, if you look at Tunisia, if you look at Egypt. It just happened there. I mean, nobody, and most likely the Israelis at least, would have thought that this could happen. People went out on the streets. They really, they went out in the streets and they chased Mubarak, they chased Ben Ali. What could the role of people be within such a project?
So, I think for anything that that far-reaching and that far-fetched, people mobilization is critical. But the thing to keep in mind is that people, and this is what Egypt and Tunisia are learning, people are not just a resource. People are a force. And the second you trigger a wave, you might like its initial inertia, but you might not know where it's going to stop. And I think it's very important to keep in mind that processes that are triggered through the masses sometimes go well further than they're anticipated and don't necessarily achieve the results. I think what's more important than sheer mobilization is in fact the education, and it is the dedication to the values that we consider to be universal human rights and fundamental principles of democracy. So I think mobilization of the masses is something that really the masses should be responsible for. And when they're ready to do it, they'll do it anyway. They might not do it the best, but they're probably the best ones to do it. And shouldn't be abused by really any particular, or necessarily shouldn't be manipulated, or shouldn't be artificially guided by external hands.